Welcome you to the Experience Platforms webinar. This is a short webinar. It will last 30 minutes. So we have a lot of material to cover. Very happy and excited that you've all joined. We have quite a number of people who've signed up, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to my colleagues today who will be presenting. We've got Joe Pine, who's well known in the experience space for years of work and seminal and highly regarded books in this space. So welcome, Joe. And then we have
Thanks,
Joe,
Peter.
Joe Belliati, who's another colleague, and he has tremendous experience working specifically in music-related integrations. He's been doing some really interesting things recently, and so he's going to present a little case study that will show how experience platforms are actually working in action.
Thank you.
So today we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to introduce this idea of experience platforms. I met Joe Pine last year, and I've been starting to see more activity around experiences being offered on platforms. And so I approached Joe, and he said, you know what, I've been looking at this space as well. So we got to thinking, hey, you know, let's really research this. And so over the past year, we've been building a database and having an ongoing discussion and thinking through some frameworks and developing some really detailed case studies around how experience platforms actually work in practice. What does it mean to bring experiences onto platforms? What does it mean in terms of the ability to continue to personalize, but also harness the power of platforms to really scale? And so that's really one of the interesting things about experiences platforms is you can combine these two together. So we're going to walk through that. Got quite a number of people on. And so I think we'll just launch into the content today. So let's jump in to this. Really what we're doing is crashing these two big ideas together. I come from the platform side of the equation and actually work with Jeff Parker and Marshall Van Alstyne, who were the authors of Platform Revolution, which has been a highly regarded book. And in fact, Jeff Parker and Marshall Van Alstyne last year won the Thinkers 50 Award for their work on platform and their implications for engaging markets in completely new ways and actually changing the nature of how firms organize themselves to create more value outside the boundaries of the firm. And I won't speak for Joe Pine, but if you could just briefly describe your work around experience economy.
Sure, Peter. We've been talking about the experience economy for 25 years now. We used to say it's emerging, a forthcoming experience economy, but now we say that it's here. That's why in 2020 we released the book that you see here. It's the third edition of it, where we focus on competing for customer time, attention, and money as the three currencies of the experience economy. And I'll be talking more about it, of course, in a little bit.
Fantastic. So today we want to give you an overview of what we think of in terms of experience platforms, but also would like to introduce the multi-client study that we're launching next month. This is a deep dive on this topic and is really designed to support senior decision makers in companies that are looking for how do you bring these into your corporate strategy, help in identifying what are great examples of these, how they actually work, share the database that we're developing. But also a multi-client study isn't us just delivering content. It's also soliciting your specific interests and areas. And so we meld these. And so we would like to kick off with a workshop in which the discussants will bring together their perspectives. And that will help shape the additional research and agenda for this deep dive on experience platforms. And then we'll do one-on-one specific engagements with companies to talk about their specific issues and do some additional research around that. So the final report will be a combination of the general discussion but also a deep dive into the specifics of the clients that participate in the multi-client. And we anticipate that taking about 3 months. So we'd like to kick off in December, do the research and the one-on-one discussions in January, and then deliver the final report in February. So with that, let's turn to Joe Pine again and have him walk through this concept of the experience economy to give us a grounding in that area.
Thanks, Peter. This is the primary model from our book, The Experience Economy, that talks about how economies have changed over time. And I know many of you are very familiar with it because I recognize many of you. But it basically talks about how we've gone from an agrarian economy based off commodities to an industrial economy based off goods to a service economy. And today we're in an experience economy. An economy where experiences have become the predominant economic offering, where experiences are increasingly what consumers as well as business people are looking for. And it originally came out of my original book on mass customization, where I recognized that customization is the antidote to commodization. The commodization, like the law of gravity, drags you down year after year after year. I mean, if you do nothing else, you will be commoditized. Whereas customization lifts you up and turns a good into a service and a service into an experience. And so when Jim Gilmore and I also asked the question about what it turns an experience into, we recognize that if you design an experience that's so appropriate for a particular person, exactly the experience that they need at this moment in time, then you can't help but turn to what we often call a life transforming experience, an experience that changes us in some way. And that we call a transformation, which is that fifth and final economic offering in this progression of economic value. And transformations are in fact hot on the heel of experiences, encompassing fitness centers and healthcare and universities and coaches of all stripes. So every business has to decide, what business is it really in? Going from commodities through goods, services to experiences and transformations, and then create the economic value that the customers are desiring from them. And so one of the things you see is that every one of these is becoming platformized. In fact, commodities have always been sold on platforms. The original market in the center of town, where the farmers on one side would come from the fields and bring their goods, and all the people would come from the houses and into that market. And then increasingly those have been digitized. I had an opportunity a couple of years ago to Flora Holland, a huge flower market outside of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And where over millions of flowers are going through every day. They're all sold digitally today, but they're physically moved, many of them directly through that one huge place in the Netherlands. So they're going from physical platforms to digital platforms. The same thing with goods. You can think of the high street or a shopping mall as a physical platform for where buyers come to meet sellers and bring all those wares together and complete transactions. But now those have been digitized to create digital platforms, with most notably, of course, Amazon, but then also eBay and many others, where you can go online and find the goods that you want. Services became platformized most recently. You don't think of too many physical services, but maybe a strip mall where you have the dry cleaners and the shoe repair and that sort of thing. But for the most part, now you look at all the rise of on-demand apps like Uber and Lyft and Fiverr and TaskRabbit and Venmo and so on, right? All of those are services platforms. So now what Peter and I have both seen is this rise of experience platforms, where people are coming online to be able to find the experiences that they want to have at this moment. And then even some transformational ones, right? Creating transformative experiences out of those. And so that's what the study is all about. And a little bit I'm going to talk about more details about particular types of platforms that are out there and what sort of markets they're serving and so forth.
Great. Okay, so what does a platform do? Platforms have been around also for a while. Credit card companies are considered platforms, and they really took off in the 1950s. But it wasn't until the 2000s where platforms really began to take off because of this digitization, the rise of the internet that allowed for matching. And so, at a very simple level, what does a platform do? It connects buyers to sellers. But it does it in incredibly efficient ways with new features that really drive additional value and scale. right? These recommendation engines, for example, matching folks that you couldn't. So the transaction costs of getting the buyers and sellers together really crushes those. And so that actually leads to lots of interesting implications in terms of pricing. So how you go about pricing platforms. And so the whole field and a lot of companies have built up around these platform business models. And so what do they do? So platforms are involved in creation. You see right now, actually, a lot of platforms building specialized tools to enable those that participate on the platform to do their jobs and their creation process more effectively. So that's a really interesting space. As I mentioned, recommendation engines, so this discovery, and now we're moving from kind of simple recommendations to very sophisticated AI-driven recommendation engines. In fact, there's a new book out just on recommendation engines because they're so important, and the platforms leverage them in many ways to create value. Then you've got the matching functions, which it benefits from the discovery and the recommendation engines, but really puts those parties together that and does it in very efficient ways. Then you've also got the enablement, the back end stuff that we don't see so often, but are very critical to the success of platforms. That are the back end payment processes, the ability for parties to chat and message, so messaging features. All of these things contribute to the power of the platforms, and the great platform design brings these things all together, and then also creates the governance mechanisms, because what you want to do is you want to bring valuable participants that create positive value to your platform and exclude those that are bad actors that are creating problems. And we read in the news today about some of these problem cases, but the job of a platform is to constantly set up and manage the policy and governance rules to create value and minimize negative impacts to the platform. And those that don't manage that well can have severe reputational damage to the platform. So this whole area of platform governance is also a key feature of what platforms do and the success in their ability to scale at these incredible rates. So next up. So what you really want to be able to drive, and this is kind of a secret sauce or one of the things, the holy grail that many startups and incumbents that are launching platform strategies are really after, is to create this flywheel, or what academics call network effects, where you get this positive reinforcement. The more participants on the platform, the more value is created, which attracts more participants and creating more value. And if you can get that flywheel running, it just, you can see the growth. And in fact, if you watch the users, participants, the numbers of participants, you often see these inflection points where it's slow and steady as you go, and then they hit these inflection points where these flywheels really kick in, and you really see these platforms explode in size and scale. So that's what we're after. And then the question is how does this relate to this whole field that Joe has been working on, which is experiences, right? And in fact, there are many really interesting and cool ways that these things can link together. So Joe, I'll turn it back to you, and you can run through your A to Z here.
Right. So this actually is a small subset of the number of experience platforms that are out there. And I did organize it basically from A to Z, just to show the breadth of what is going on. And perhaps most notable among these in terms of the true experience is Airbnb, which started as selling you a couch in somebody else's home, and then a room, and then maybe the entire house, and then moved to trips and experiences that you have while you are visiting another locale, setting up with somebody to hop the bars with, or take a painting class, a cooking class, whatever it might be. Of course, with the rise of the Corona crisis, they had to start selling digital experiences, right? To provide a place for all those on the seller side to be able to continue to make money, which was a great thing. Many of these are marketplaces like that, like Red Balloon that was founded in 2001 by Naomi Simpson in Australia. Many of these, some of these are big, some of them are small. Some of them create for physical platform or for physical experiences. Some of them are for virtual digital experiences. One of the notable things, you see MasterCard Priceless Cities right in the middle there, is that many loyalty programs are moving from just giving you what you wanted anyway for free to selling you experiences. So the MasterCard, Delta, Marriott, Accor, all of these, it's not just about getting an upgrade, getting a free room or whatever. It's the experiences that you want to have while you are traveling. Some of these are very high end, like Don't Die Wondering. Some of them are very mass market, like Into the Blue as marketplace platforms. Some of them are B2B, like Kapow is a corporate events platform to be able to help you design and create everything you need for a corporate event. Some are even transformational that go from experiences up towards transformation, including Numondo, which is part of the whole shift to transformational travel. All right, it's a big growing sector of travel. Again, at least before COVID hit, was basically, I want to go and travel. It's going to affect my life. It's going to change me. It's going to help me achieve my aspirations. Numondo connects you into those. Others are business to employee. Better Up is a transformational platform that focuses on employees by providing them with coaches during time of digital transformation. So you see this entire breadth of all the different kinds of platforms that are out there. And it says that there's a lot of places for your company to go to find the right type of platform, to find the right categorization. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to develop frameworks that describe what's happening amidst all of this activity and then prescribe what each individual company can do about it, each member of the multi-client study. And given this breadth, it'd be good to go into a little bit of a case study of how platforms being used. And Joe Belliati, you can talk about that.
Cool, thank you. So Grubhub, it's the food delivery service we all know. Like many brands, they're engaging consumers in the real world. So in 2019, they created a piece of IP, a program called Soundbites, which was a live concert series. They'd have 250, 300 consumers come to a live concert, and then they would broadcast that later on YouTube and they'd post it on their socials. So enter COVID, the entire live music industry, like everything else, shut down. So Grubhub had to reinvent how they were going to connect with consumers. So what they did is they took this program, Soundbites, and they turned it into a virtual experience. So they partnered with a company called First Two Media, which is a company that creates brand IP. They produce, they distribute, and they market digital experiences. So live stream, concert experiences, virtual experiences. So Grubhub took this and they started doing it as a virtual experience. And what happened was they started to see the reach just grow just tremendously. If you go to the next slide, you'll start to see what happened when they took this sort of pre, during, post marketing framework. They would create branded assets and distribute them across social channels and YouTube, and they would get 4 million people to engage with it. Then during the moment, the live tune-in moment, they started getting 2.6 million views. This is one example. This is one broadcast, and they've done this multiple times. So they got 2.6 million views. And the really interesting thing to me is that they drove over 18,000 orders from that live experience. So here they were really getting people in that moment to not just engage with the brand, but actually transact and take the opportunity to engage with the product itself, or the service in this case. And then 75% were likely to order a week after. And then of course there was still the post stream, social and YouTube and all that sort of good stuff that got additional reach after that. So what Grubhub did was, like I said, they started taking this and they repeated this formula, and they're seeing tremendous success. And what's happened is what started as a 250, 300 person live event has now turned into TV-sized audiences when you think about the reach and the engagement that they're getting through these virtual experiences. So when you look forward, Grubhub is likely going to, it's not an either or, I think it's both. They're going to, hopefully go back to live experiences, but add this layer of this virtual digital experience on top of it and give it that incremental reach. And if you look here, this is, and Peter can speak to this as well, but this is where we look at the role of a company like First Two Media, where we have in-person events, we have virtual events, and how do you connect the two? And how does a company like Grubhub not just post content on YouTube, but actually make it work for them really hard and get that engagement, get that reach, get those orders to come in, you know? And that's where these companies, these complement companies like First Two Media play a critical role.
Yeah, so when we speak of platforms, we often think of, for example, the YouTube. But the reality is that the value of these platforms are also greatly enhanced by what we call complements. These are other companies that build additional value on these platforms. So when we are doing our analysis of experience platforms, we're not just looking at the YouTubes of the world, we're looking at the ecosystems that are evolving around this and the specialized companies that are emerging to provide that additional value. So as Joe mentioned, FirstTube actually does a lot to make the Grubhub experience and the reach actually happen, right? So they schedule the media, they work with the artists, they kind of pull together. If Grubhub had just tried to do an event on YouTube, they would not have gotten anywhere near this level of engagement. So what becomes interesting is, Joe Pine just mentioned companies like Marriott and MasterCard offering experiences. Well, they're not necessarily the ones actually doing it. They're actually reaching out and building an ecosystem of complements that enable them to then deliver, because an experience happens in part, through the creative process of bringing in, sometimes it's artists, it can be other types of people who have specialized expertise, enable that engagement. But it's the understanding of the way that this can be platformized and how platforms work and can be reinforced to take those special moments and then scale them in incredible ways. So that's what we, a key insight into this space. And so it seems like pretty simple on the surface, but actually to execute a successful engagement strategy around experience platforms takes a lot more, and you got to really think through what that ecosystem looks like. So let me turn back to the multi-client study. As I've mentioned, we've done quite a bit of pre-work looking at various cases and built up a database. We're not done. And in fact, we'd love to have your ideas. If you've spotted some interesting experience platforms, we'd love to hear from you. Because this is kind of a first effort, right? I don't think anybody else has codified this systematically and really given a label to this new phenomenon that's emerging. So that pre-work would then fold into a workshop in which we have participants join in a couple-hour discussion of what they're seeing, what questions they have, what we can share from our pre-work, but then what additional work needs to be done. And then we'll go off and do that. And then in conjunction, in parallel with that, we do the one-on-one meetings with each of the company participating in the study to understand their specific. Of course, that would be confidential and proprietary to them. We may say, highlight some common understandings with the larger group, but we would not reveal the specifics that we learned from the specific companies and their specific issues. So the idea is to benefit from the collective, but also make this a targeted analysis. So in the January period and early February, we will do that, combining and then deliver a final report mid to late February. So that's the timeline for the study. And there's any number of questions that this work, I think, engages. Here are just a few. One is, what experience platforms fit my growth and customer engagement objectives, right? There's a lot of things happening out there. So how do you pick? How do you prioritize? What works, what doesn't? And that's an emerging space, right? The book hasn't been written on this topic yet. It's really just, starting. And then how should you build or buy or integrate, right? That's a key question. Are there already platforms out there you can tap into, or do you actually have to build it? There's, in the whole platform literature, there's this idea of closed platforms where a company kind of owns the whole, chain from beginning to end. And people would put Netflix kind of in that space, right? Versus an open platform where like Twitch, which allows, a variety of people to come on and create that content. So which way do you want to go? Do you want to go open or close? So there's a lot of strategic questions. And then how do you do those integrations, particularly large companies that are really looking for scale, right? You don't want to do a platform that only affects a couple hundred people to drive this and get buy-in from senior executives. You really were talking about impacting potentially millions, like the Grubhub case illustrated. And then there's a lot of stuff you may have to do internally to make this happen. So what are the internal processes, capabilities, even changing thinking? Loyalty programs are typically offered as discounts or something the company already has. Building up a whole ecosystem and an experience platform strategy would be a completely different way of thinking about loyalty programs. So what does that entail on the inside to be able to really launch this and make this happen?
And Peter, let me
Sure.
interject that I really hate most loyalty programs as they are being constituted today, because I think they're self-commoditizing. When you focus people on giving away something that they're buying from you, what you're saying is, well, the real price isn't really the real price, because we got to fit in there all those discounts or this free stuff we're going to give you. So it overinflates it, and it gets people thinking it's not worth that much, and it commoditizes it. But instead, if you take loyalty programs and turn them into experience platforms, it means that companies can add value beyond what they do today by using these complementers, by finding other organizations that can supply the experiences that people want in concert with what you do. It actually can increase your sales rather than you giving away, revenue.
Right. And there's a lot that companies have to offer artists and other creators, and they have customers, huge customer bases that these artists and creators are after. And so it's a matter of connecting and figuring out how to work together to create that additional value. So we're running up to the end, and we do want to open it up and reflect on the multi-client studies. To participate, please email me and Joe Pine or Joe Beliotti, and we'd be happy to do a call with you to provide you more details. The deliverables are this kickoff workshop that we discussed that would bring together the entire group of clients that join. And then we do the one-on-one team meetings. And you could bring in other parties from your company to attend those. And so the goal there is to share, broadly within your organizations, the learnings and have them weigh in on the questions that we'll explore. And then we'll share this database, and then we'll do deep dive case studies. And then also very, I think, valuable and powerful. We've been thinking a lot about the frameworks of thinking about this and how to organize your thinking about how to do this effectively. And then a final report. Wrap up here, but thank you all for joining. Really appreciate your time. Please reach out to us if you'd like to explore further. This is an interesting topic, and I think we're just at the very beginning of exploring this space. So we think of all of you on this call as frontier explorers. So thank you for joining us on that journey.